Recognize the gentle lady from Michigan, McDonald Rivet, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much. I want to start just by thanking Chairman Perry and Ranking Member Stanton for holding this hearing on what seems to be a bipartisan level of frustration. I represent a community in Michigan, Midland, Michigan, that 5 years ago saw multiple dams fail after heavy rainfall. In fact, I personally ran one of the evacuation centers. It caused massive flooding and water levels reaching as high as 35 feet above normal levels. Thankfully, no one died in that, which I actually just think is a miracle. But it resulted in over $200 million in damages. And not only did it decimate our infrastructure like our roads and bridges, it destroyed homes that families had lived in for generations and small businesses that families had dedicated their entire lives to. So here we sit 5 years later. Ms. Lauder, I hear your story and it just resonated so deeply with me. It is a continuous struggle, a continuing struggle in order to resolve the pieces that FEMA came in to help. But what we see over and over again, like multiple federal programs, is that the intent of FEMA and the amazing people who work there is dying under a cumbersome bureaucracy that is so frustrating, particularly for local people who don't have the experience of dealing with big federal bureaucracies and are just at the point of giving up. Our local communities are owed hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is nothing in a federal budget, but everything in a local budget. So I do want to just say that I understand the frustration. But what I'm not understanding is the suggested remedy, which is a suggested elimination of FEMA, and also the suggestion that this actually can be solved at a local level if states and locals would just budget more appropriately, which, having been a state senator on the Appropriations Committee, I can tell you states cannot handle this just by budgeting. Handling this on their own. And in particular, when we're simultaneously considering extensive cuts, including $880 billion from our Medicaid program. I mean, it just defies common sense. But I do think we have to do something because we can't tolerate this. And my local community still sits there and waits. And I hope it doesn't take 5 years for you. But I hear you, Mr. Curry, when you were talking about, okay, what can we do? We know that block granting is also a very difficult solution because most federal block grants, again, as a state appropriator, come with burdensome, like incredibly complex and burdensome regulations. But you said, let's address the root causes. Everything isn't broken. But I didn't hear you say what those root causes are, and I would love to hear that.
Sure. Let me take the grant issue. And so a lot has been talked about recently about switching FEMA to a block grant. I'm not so much just concerned with the name of the grant. A block grant just means theoretically that you provide all the funding up front and the state manages it instead of the federal government holding the money and doling it out slowly, which is what the FEMA process is. The root cause is that the process is too complicated and there's too many rules and overlapping requirements and inconsistency for the years that go on with recovery. Turnover and staffing plays into this too, and different cultural changes at FEMA. So the problem is that you have an infrastructure project that could take 10 to 15 years to rebuild, and all throughout there's cost changes, and you have to go back and forth to the federal government. It's very, very confusing. I think what we're trying to do is we want to come up with something where the federal government still provides the support that the states will never be able to come up with, like you said. But it does so in a way that they provide it to the state where there's flexibility, but there's still the appropriate oversight and controls, and that's the balance you're trying to strike. With block granting, you give up some of the control at the federal level and the oversight, but you give the states more flexibility.
I'm
but
sorry
if you
to
don't
interrupt
design
you,
the
I'm
block,
aware of my time.
Yeah.
I just want to say, in your experience, and I know this is a bit of an unfair question, but have you ever seen a federal to state block grant that did not come with its own set of rules and overlapping requirements?
It does, but we have to build it better in this case. So, for example, with the community development block grant, disaster recovery, one of the challenges with that is that you try to build the whole program up front and then turn it over to the states, and that takes too long. So the money doesn't get there quick enough. We have to build this system and the rules and requirements up front, get the states up to speed on it, get everyone familiar with the process, build their system so they can manage this amount of money so it can be turned over much quicker. And that's very possible to do.